This episode of the MSP podcast is brought to you by Big Tex Outdoors. Everything you could possibly need for your firearm. If he doesn't have it, you probably don't need it. And F.A.S.T holsters. Can't do a sub 5-second fast drill? We'll get a F.A.S.T holster. If you still can't, well, at least you know it's not the holster's fault. And primary and secondary, the definitive source for the armed professional and the responsible citizen. Quit your bitching about all the rules and get better. Hey guys, welcome back to the MSP podcast, nicknamed the Get Better podcast, nicknamed the Self-Reliant podcast. Why do I say, the Self-Reliant podcast would get better? Because guys, check it out, man. It's not only about shooting, right? It's about combatives, whether it be Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai. It's about nutrition. It's about working out. And it's also about your rights as a free American, right? As some of you may know, the things going on in Virginia are kind of scary right now because of our kooky governor and all the Dems that were put in office by Bloomberg. Anyway, I try not to get into politics, but it is what it is, right? So super excited to have my buddy on, Josh Savani, as the guest today. I am horrible at introductions, right? So I'm going to go ahead and let you do your own introduction. Don't be modest.
Yeah. So, I'm Josh. I've been shooting pretty seriously since, I guess, about 2006 is when I started getting into competitive shooting. Started with IDPA and then USPSA, and then just got more serious, taking more training, things like that. I'm also an attorney. I've been an attorney since 2013, I think is when I officially got notice that I had passed the bar. And I am the Director of Research and Information for the National Rifle Association's Institute for Legislative Action. That sounds like a lot of stuff, but it's primarily what we do is the legal legislative side. My division doesn't do as much of the litigation side, although we do help with litigation a lot too. And then we also do historical research and data analytics. So, surveys, polling, things like that, to both issue-based and to help with political campaigns. Because that's where, ILA, for those that don't know, is the political part of the NRA. It's not actually a separate organization. It's not a separate legal entity, but within the NRA, there is, created by the organization's bylaws, there's a separate kind of political dedicated arm, and that's what ILA is. And
you've got your shooting sports, you've got your publications, like our buddy Jake Razio over at Shooting Illustrated and stuff like that. And then you have the legal wing, right? Which is funny because everybody thinks that the huge percentage of what goes on at the NRA is really the ILA, and that's not so true. Am I wrong about that? Or
we're definitely not. We're not close to half of the total association. I mean, you have a huge number of obviously the original, and when originally founded, we're focused on education and training and competitions. That's where all the Creedmoor matches and stuff come from, or originally NRA. And those are, that still is, all the other divisions combined are definitely much larger than ILA. People obviously tend to be very focused on the political because, the way that a lot of people look at it is other stuff almost doesn't matter if you don't have the political, because if you can't do any of the other stuff, and you just get to talk about it on the internet rather than actually do it, then because it's all illegal, then it's not going to be a very fun time. So, there's a heavy emphasis, I think, especially from a lot of people outside looking in on legal and legislative. And I think that again, that's for good reason, because that's one, when people are the most concerned is when their rights are actually, they feel that their rights are in danger. And so that's when people are going to look to, better organize with other like-minded people to accomplish a task. So.
Yep. So let's go ahead and get the legal caveat out of the way. Why don't you go ahead and say that right now?
Obviously these are my own views. I'm your friend, and this isn't necessarily the any official views of my employer, but especially when it comes to the gun and shooting stuff, because I think like most people that have been doing this for a while, I'm very opinionated, and
Sure.
the NRA doesn't hold really opinions about a lot of stuff like that.
Right. Exactly. Okay, cool. So I want to get that out of the way, guys. So one of the things that I'm going to go ahead and extrapolate on, because Josh is too humble to do that, right? So he's just hasn't been interested in the shooting sports since the time that he said he's reached a very competent high level, right? You are a master in production in USPSA. Mm-hmm. You are a master in production for IDPA.
I don't know in IDPA if I'm a USPSA master. I'm not sure. I don't shoot.
I could have sworn the last time I saw it you were.
I maybe am. I'm not 100%. I just don't pay attention enough. I still am an IDPA member right now, and I shoot. I only shot like 3 matches this year. That's a whole other story. But,
wow, you're talking to me, bro. You're talking to me. Believe me, I know, man. Believe me, I know. But that whole master in the USPSA versus IDPA. Insert IDPA jokes here, but that's okay. You know what I mean? I
like both actually. And I got IDPA was the first shooting sport that I really got interested in. So
sure.
That's a special place to me.
And then you were involved. You ran the NRA Fairfax USPSA match for a long time as the match director.
Yeah. Right? And before that, I took over when Todd Green got too sick to run the kind of sort of tactical game matches that we were hosting at NRA. I took over those first before we switched over to USPSA.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those are really, that was kind of a blended sport. Actually, IDPA it's kind of interesting. Like the rules that when IDPA did the major rule changes in whatever that was, like 2017, I think, when they went to 1 second to point down, getting rid of the judgment-based cover calls.
Right.
Those were things that we had actually done in KSTG. Those are some of the biggest things actually, the 3 main things that for us were the judgment-based cover calls, 1 second per point down, and letting people shoot from appendix.
Right.
Those are the 3 main differences between there were some other smaller ones, but that was kind of I remember talking to Todd about it, being like, well, if IDPA did those 3 things, we'd just shoot IDPA. We would have, it's
yeah. I don't want to take it sideways, dude. When I posted this one thing, man, if USPSA let everybody shoot from appendix, including production and carry optics, IDPA would be shaking in their boots, man.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's, I shot, limited minor from appendix. I've done that. It's hard to be competitive in limited and minor. If you're really serious, I think that's I never found appendix to be particularly detrimental, but I did.
Minor is.
Yeah,
100%. So, and my whole thing and you have fast coin. Which fast coin do you have?
10.
You have 10. Okay, so you have 10, right? So those of you that know what the fast coin is, I'm not going to go on because it's going to seem self-congratulatory between me and Josh, right? So Josh has coin 10, I have coin 15. There are only 18 coins in the world other than Todd 00, God rest his soul, right? So major accomplishment. The reasons why I want to bring that up, guys, is not because I want to pat my buddy here on the back, but he lives that lifestyle. You know what I mean? He's in the competitive sports. He supported the competitive sports in his area. Obviously he's an American, so he carries a gun everywhere that he possibly can legally, right? And he's attorney fighting for rights with what he does at his job. So that's why I have him on today's show, because there's so much speculation, right? Is this like, a red herring thing? Are they going as full retard as it seems like they're going? And just gets the insight as a person who is an attorney who happens to be in the industry and his own personal opinion. So that being said, man, are they going as full retard as it sounds like they are?
Yeah, I think we have to. Like, if you look at the bills that they introduced in the special session in the summer, they were gun bans with no grandfather provisions. So that's just straight up firearm confiscation. It's about as it's about as restrictive a gun control policy you can introduce. So I think we have to expect that they are. I think there are some, just to lay kind of a historical framework, the Democrats, who are most of the people that don't support guns in Virginia, and most of the Republicans generally are more supportive. I mean, doesn't have to be that way, but that's the way it is right now. There's
Sure. Yeah.
lots of, if you want to get into like political partisanship and why that occurs, it is what it is. But I think that a lot of the Democrats that just came into power, for the first time in 20 years, essentially they control, they control both houses of the General Assembly, and they control all the statewide office holders. They haven't had control of the House of Delegates for 20 years, and I think they have seen gun owners as one of the major impediments to that. So, like a lot of stuff, this is somewhat about punishing your political rival, or at least the constituents of your political rivals, especially when you see them as a major constituency that kept you out of office. And maybe it's not even the primary thing you want to get done, but it's because you want to punish those people that kept you from getting that stuff done for so long. I mean, there's a lot of, I think, pettiness that goes into politics sometimes, and there's also, the people. Obviously, Virginia has changed. The people that are getting elected in Northern Virginia that now, almost all of the leadership positions, actually all of the leadership positions, are essentially going to be Northern Virginia. So, the demographics in Northern Virginia have changed as far as gun owners go. There aren't, even though you can't get into a match it's almost impossible to shoot a USPSA match at NRA. There's, it's like California. There's a lot of gun owners in California.
Yeah.
But the problem is there's way more people that don't like guns. We do our best to change that.
Yeah.
I think that focusing on messaging that is inclusive is possible to reach people that aren't like a traditional, gun supporter is important.
So let me ask you this, right? Like kind of made my snotty comment at the beginning about Bloomberg and stuff like that, right? So here's the thing. I don't know how I feel about this. I go back and forth on this, right? For example, the thing you did about, kind of the revenge thing and punishing the constituents of their rivals, of being, not having control for the past 20 years and never getting anything done. And now they finally have control. So they're going to go at us where we live, basically, right? And I'm like, yeah, man, but if it was just that, they would eventually see they have other things to do. Here's the thing that I'm afraid of is when they're bought and paid for, right? And then they are somewhat of an unwritten contractual obligation.
Yeah, they can't say that.
They can't say that. Absolutely not. Yeah. But, I mean, who are we kidding?
Right.
Who are we kidding?
I'm actually pulling something up. We just did we have some, it's probably going to be better to link them, but we have some billboards running outside of Richmond. You basically can't enter Richmond now I don't know if you're able to see it, but it basically says how Bloomberg has purchased this, and there's 2 weeks until this starts. So, and they're digital billboards, so that number is going to go down. So hopefully it's going to be reminding everybody as they drive past Richmond in basically any direction right now that this is happening.
Right.
And we're trying to, but that's definitely the case. I mean, I think there's some interesting dynamics with Bloomberg. With Bloomberg entering the presidential race, if he doesn't want them to go fully the step towards confiscation. But again, I think we have to assume that that's where they're headed. And it's also absurd to, this idea that you're going to, I've never understood the idea if you truly see these things as so dangerous, you're just going to be like, well, the ones that are out there are okay. It kind of undermines the actual, that this isn't about public safety at all. Well, one, we know that rifles of all types are used in a very small percentage of crimes in the country. Almost all crimes that are committed with firearms are committed with handguns. So there's,
I just saw this meme, and you never know if it's true or not, but you want to look it up, that more people were killed by salad last year than firearms.
Yeah. All that dangerous romaine.
All that, that ridiculous, bro.
Yeah.
It's fully semi-automatic. Ridiculous.
Yeah. So, right. I mean, that it is true. I don't know if that exact one is true, but, every year there's more people killed with cutting implements than rifles of any type.
Oh, more people killed with hands and feet.
Yeah. Or people killed with, I mean, the cutting one, it's substantially more. Hands and feet, it's more. But that's why it's clearly not basically what happened is gun control was about handguns until the 1980s, and they saw that they were losing that fight.
Right.
And especially now, post 2008, with District of Columbia versus Heller, with the Supreme Court clearly saying handguns are a protected arm, they had to pivot. And so it's this idea, and it started in the late 1980s where they pivoted towards, guns that they could make people believe are extra super scary. I mean, that's really what it's about, public opinion, like trying to manipulate public opinion rather than trying to do something that's actually policy focused. I mean, I think that anytime that you look at, especially the assault weapon issue is the best, example of that, because one, it's a made up category of arms. Often when you ask like the people that support these things to articulate what guns those are, they can't. Right. What is the definition of one of those guns that you want to ban? It's often, they use these, the most common way to do it now is they use, feature tests, like does it have a pistol grip or a bayonet lug, which are obviously, not non-critical parts of the function of the firearm. So
right, but the scary part about the one they're doing it with, and correct me if it's SB16, right?
Yeah, that's going to be the majority leader. So Tex Outdoors is now going to be the majority leader.
Right. So that one or like features.
Yeah, we actually learned about that. I don't know if it's anything that can convert. I think it's one of those things. I hope it was sloppy drafting, because otherwise, if they really are saying that, like, and everything's it's all a class 6 felony. So this is a felony for if you had an A2 birdcage somewhere in your house, that would be a felony. If you had an A2 pistol grip, or just and I use those examples because a lot of gun owners have taken those off their guns to put aftermarket things on.
Yeah, they're in the plastic bottle, plastic,
like in a toolbox, or I don't know where. Like I have A2 flash hunters like all over the place.
Right.
I had like a stack of them somewhere, and I don't know where they went.
Yeah.
But they're not dangerous. It's just a 2-ounce piece of steel. Like it has no dangerous properties on its own. So it's not something that you're like, oh, I need to control this because it's dangerous. Like you don't put them in a safe. Like there's no, same with the pistol grip, like it's a piece of plastic. And those things, because you could take a firearm that doesn't meet their definition and put one of those things on, and it would then that would convert it into what would meet their definition of assault firearm. Those would also be felonies. And that was the most, that was absurd. I mean,
so
go ahead.
So if you took an A2 flash hider and threaded a Nerf gun.
No, just the flash hider itself.
Right. But
the flash hider alone is, but I mean, if you had it on Nerf gun. Yeah,
just threw it on, that's an assault weapon.
Because the flash hider is capable of converting a gun that wouldn't be an assault firearm under their definition into one that is. The same with a pistol grip, because if you had like something that had like one of those weird duckbills on it that wasn't, and then you took the pistol grip and put it on that gun, it would technically convert that gun into an assault weapon or assault firearm under their definition, and then that would make it a conversion part, and conversion parts are the same thing as the actual gun under the SB16.
So full retard. They just went full retard on this. All right. So here's the other thing, I'm going too deep into legalese and losing the audience here.
Yeah.
How do they come up with that, right? Because while people may debate that the U.S. The U.S. Second Amendment, can be cloudy. It's not. Get over the semicolon. Just get over it, right?
Yeah.
There can be argument to that. The Virginia Constitution, there is no cloudiness whatsoever. There is no ambiguity. It is the right of the people, and the people make the militia shall not be infringed, right? So you have laws like that. The other one is SB 64, correct? And the amendment to that, it makes it could be a felony to being a felony, and includes parading or demonstrating with a firearm. How are they going to overturn? Because it's not just this making this into law. They're in direct contradiction to other laws that are already on the books, such as open carry and such as the Virginia Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be almost certainly. It's not. I think it's a safe bet that there will be legal challenges if anything does get passed. I mean, that's under both the Virginia constitutional provision and the federal Second Amendment. One of the problems has been getting, we had basically just a short history legalese lesson.
Sure, yeah, no, go ahead,
you got to go back to, so like there was the whole collective rights idea was made up basically in the 20th century, and it took us a long time to get rid of that. And a lot of people that went to law school during that time, who are now judges on state courts, federal courts, don't have a robust understanding, or really they aren't willing to give the right to keep and bear arms provisions a robust interpretation. Even though the language is pretty perfectly clear. I think that's changing. One of the really good things at the federal level that the Trump administration has done is we have 170 new judges, including 2 Supreme Court justices, who are much more likely to give robust interpretations to constitutional provisions. We just had a case. I was at the Supreme Court on December 2nd. We had New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, which is our New York affiliate.
Right.
We had that case at the Supreme Court. We're not sure exactly. The New York tried to get out of that the last minute with a lot of procedural maneuvering. But
sure,
if they don't take that case, we feel like we have 4 other cases currently essentially sitting at the Supreme Court waiting.
Right. So let's clarify that for the audience, because everybody's pardon the pun, up in arms, as well they should be, about SB 16, SB 64. They're like, no one's talking about the thing that had the hearing that was on December 2nd. Right. And that basically was the New York rod and gun. Excuse me if I'm wrong about that. Yeah. The law was that New Yorkers in the city of New York could not take their firearm out of their house unless it was to one of the 5 ranges in the 5 boroughs. Like if they had a second home, they couldn't take it that. They couldn't take it anywhere except for house or those shooting ranges. And they basically got and went up to the Supreme Court. New York changed it and relaxed some of those, and also put in a provision that they couldn't go back and change it back to the way it was. And that hearing was all boiling. It's like, is this case now moot now? Right. Is that what happened?
It's the legal doctrine of mootness, is that you have to have a live controversy to have a decision in the United States. Courts won't issue a decision when there's not an actual case or controversy there. It's a constitutional requirement. But the really interesting thing about the case is it gives us an opportunity for the Supreme Court to more clearly articulate how the lower courts need to apply the Second Amendment to gun control laws. A lot of lower courts, right after Heller and McDonald, so Heller was in 2008, McDonald 2010, right after those cases, there was a time period where courts were trying to figure out what to do, but they were also more wary of getting overturned by the Supreme Court. And so we were getting more decisions that better respected the Second Amendment. And then as the Supreme Court didn't take cases, we got into this, I would say that lower courts started to have more resistance to issuing anything that was especially protective of gun rights. That's not true in all cases. I mean, because of Heller and McDonald, we got all the people that have carry permits in Illinois and DC.
Right.
Those are direct results of that.
Yep.
So we got those two. Those places are shall. They would not have gone shall issue without those Supreme Court cases. That's what led to that.
Sure.
So there are serious benefits for our constitutional rights based on all that work. But there has been in more recent years more resistance to that, and we think that if the Supreme Court will articulate a more clear way for these lower courts to apply the Second Amendment to actual gun control laws, that'll be helpful. And then the second thing is clearly articulate that the right applies outside the home. Right. I mean, it has to anybody that reads it. It says bear. I think interpreting bear to say bear inside your home is an absurd.
What's the famous line? Inside your home is right next to the word musket in the Second Amendment.
Yeah, it's like these things that we're doing right now are protected by the First Amendment, despite this is, I think, much more difficult to guess would happen than the incremental improvements in firearm technology.
Yeah,
I think are nowhere near the changes in information sharing technology that we've had over the last since from when the Bill of Rights was ratified until now, and yet this technology is still protected.
Right. One of the things I always say to people is like, well, they could have never imagined semi-automatic rifles. I'm like, have you ever seen a printing press in the time of Benjamin Franklin? Have you ever seen that thing? That is, it's like a marvel unto itself. The man, come on, guys. And actually, the first automatic weapon was actually invented in 1720. or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's a essentially they're like multiple charges in a single tube.
Yeah.
So like when you fire, like it would fire the projectiles. You have them stacked in a tube,
Right.
kind of like that. There's like an air defense system that works that way, but has a bunch of tubes,
Right.
multiple projectiles in each tube, and it can launch them separately, and it essentially is like a chain down. But that existed. That was technically fully automatic, especially by like the way we think about that now. Like you press the trigger once and it fires multiple.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they also had like the air rifle that Lewis and Clark took with them is one of the things we always point to as an example of a very early repeating rifle. And air rifles of that time were actually almost as powerful, if not more powerful, than some of the gunpowder, based muskets.
Oh,
so like I
didn't know that.
You'd never think of an air rifle as like an equivalent.
Yeah.
But at that time, the air rifles were pretty equivalent on power, and especially when it came to that was, I think, effectively one of the first like successful repeaters.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right, we're geeking out right
Yeah.
now. So
Yeah.
And then there's another case up there that was signed, and I'm probably getting this number wrong, but it was petitioned by like 25 attorney generals to the Supreme Court that certain states will not protect their citizens abroad or something like that.
Yeah.
Can you go more to that?
So some of the other cases that are there, let's just do it. This would be an easier way to look at it. Is the cases that are there right now are primarily fall into the what does it mean to bear, and what type of arms are we talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two main paths that we've been challenging since 2010. We're trying to get, everybody has a right to defend themselves under the Second Amendment, and that right is still, even though we did win in Illinois and DC, we still have 8 jurisdictions effectively that are what we call may issue, which means that the government gets to decide arbitrarily who gets to exercise their rights outside the home. Mm-hmm. And so those are the bear cases. That's there's a New Jersey case that has been at the court the longest. They've held it. They haven't denied cert, which means that the petition would go away, but they also haven't granted cert, which means that they would hear the case. So the cert petition has just been sitting there. So that's the Rogers case out of New Jersey. We just briefing on the Malpaso case out of the Fourth Circuit just went up there from Maryland. There's some others, and then the as far as the what are our arms case, there's the Werman case out of Massachusetts. That's a couple years ago. Their Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey just arbitrarily decided to reinterpret their assault weapons ban, their state level assault weapons ban, to apply to a whole bunch of different categories of guns that had never been interpreted to apply to before, and we used that as a way to challenge, gun bans generally. And so that case is also now waiting on Supreme Court to potentially take it. So those are the two things that we're most focused on. Because we see those as the obvious next steps. Like what does it mean to bear? What arms are we talking about?
Right.
And we have to work within, what the Supreme Court articulated as the, in Heller and in McDonald. And so, the test is those arms in common use at the time, which is, it's a helpful and unhelpful test, but we feel like it's a very helpful test for AR-15s.
Sure.
It has to be that the most popular centerfire rifle in the country is commmen.
Right.
Like we always, our briefing almost always says something like, if these aren't common, then F-150s aren't a common vehicle in the United States, because, we're talking about a similar number. So that's what we're focused on. Primarily because the Supreme Court that's why we think they took the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case, because it's kind of the next step. It's a smaller step than going straight to a potential complete carry outside the home case. So they don't like, the Supreme Court generally doesn't like to take these massive leaps in.
Why is that?
Because they don't know. I think the danger, especially the more conservative justices believe in kind of an incremental approach. And if you just strike down an entire area of law, you're worried about consequences that you can't foresee, the unintended consequence. Those are the type of things which I don't think that's necessarily an issue for our cases. It's more of that's their general approach to the law. Mm-hmm. And so they apply that in every situation, even though like if you think about it more of like a big federal regulatory regime and they were to just like, strike it all down, they may not be able to foresee like all the other things that are that are intertwined there. And that's why they tend to take that, that type of jurisprudential approach of let's take these small steps so we can see what the effects are before we just get rid of an entire legal regime. So,
gotcha. Okay, makes
again,
sense.
I don't think it applies really to our cases, but it's their kind of one of their interpretive methods that certain justices and judges apply, and so they're going to apply that to every case.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay, so what can law-abiding citizens do, right, to help the cause, right? But before anyone goes like, oh, here he goes, he's going to say donate to the NRA. He's not going to say that. At least I hope he doesn't. Anyway, right? But so what can people do other than financially supporting whatever organization they support to help make your job easier or have an impact on what's going on? Because I got to tell you, sometimes here's what I get down to, man. It's like, you can spit facts all you want, and it's like they just don't care, right? Everything from, all right, well, 30,000, gun deaths a year, take away legal homicides from police, take away suicides, blah, 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 and you're left with 5,000? Maybe, right? Something along that, right? And then they always hop on.
Here are suicides. Yeah, it's
right. And they're like, you don't care about people with suicides. I go, look, if they're going to kill themselves, it doesn't matter. Like, that's not true. Look at Japan. Japan has more suicides in the country, 1/10 of our population, and they have more suicides. Hard stop, not per capita. Hard stop. Right. And they don't have guns. So they're not going to stop, having guns is not going to stop suicides. You know what I mean? You go through all those facts and they just don't care. So what do you think people can do to have an impact to help as a collective to protect our rights?
Yeah. I mean, I think step one is being involved. Contact your lawmakers, even if you think there's no chance that your particular, like where I live in Fairfax, there's no chance that my lawmakers are going to be the one that like make sure that we protect our rights. But it's good that they still hear from their constituents. They will not ignore constituent contacts. That's but contact yours. Like if you just reach out to, if you're mad because Saslaw introduced SB 16, don't contact him unless he's your actual representative. Don't go contact your representatives, not
sure.
And make sure that the person you talk to understands your constituent. You can even ask for in-person meetings, like when they're in their district, or if you're going to go, in this case, down to Richmond, you can always try to get an in-person meeting to talk to them and explain to them. And like you said, I think that there are, using logic and facts is not always the most effective way. People are generally persuaded based on three things. Some people are persuaded by logic and facts, some people emotional, and some people by a more self-serving, I guess you could say, motive. And then you probably have to combine all three of those things. With politicians, the ballot box is the self-serving way that we try to ensure that they do what we want them to do. Because if they want to get reelected, they have to, convince the majority of their constituents that they're acting in their interest. I think it's for certain people in in situations where you're going to be talking to somebody that's maybe not as friendly to gun rights, making a logical argument is probably not the best way to go. Explain the personal situation, I've told people before, like, I try to explain, imagine if somebody's, for me, firearms are part of my identity.
Yep.
If somebody, when somebody tries to take that away, it's going to cause me, like, I'm going to do whatever I can to try to stop that. And so,
sorry, the reason why I was chuckling is because you went full Mandalorian there. So
yeah. Right? Yeah, but it's true. I mean, I've said that even before that show, but it was good. It's a good point. Yeah. But I think that's the those types of arguments so that they can better understand. Like, they may not understand gun owners. They may not regularly interact with gun owners, especially gun owners more like us, who this is a big part of their lives.
Yep.
And so if you try to just, take that and grab that away, you have to make it more relatable to a person who that's not for them, and they don't know anybody that's that way, but they probably have something that is a core part of their identity. And imagine the government trying to not only say you can't do that anymore, but we're going to imprison you for engaging in this thing that you think, that is part of your core identity. I mean, that's like, it's imprisoning people for their religion or things like that. Like, those types of arguments, I think, are the better ones for people that don't understand kind of where we come from. I think that's making them understand that, and you have to be respectful, and you're never going to be successful by yelling at.
How much do you think of our battle can be won by convincing the middle? I don't want to say undecided, but I want to say the one that's not leaning either way. Because I always, sometimes I forget. I mean, you know me, dude. I like to get fired up sometimes, but nothing compared to some of our, more vocal friends that we have. But then they come off like, rangy dickheads, and then the guy in the middle looks at them and is like, well, maybe that guy shouldn't have any firearms because he's an ass. You know what I mean? How important do you think, like you said, to keep that decorum, to keep that professionalism while expressing our views? I think it's huge because that's how you convince the middle.
Yeah. And I think that, one of the hard things right now is that, like I was saying before, like there's this increased partisanship generally, and so the middle's kind of going away. But the good thing about guns as a political issue is that, people will use polling all the time, but the core question, is there a individual right to possess firearms in the United States for personal protection and protecting your family? We always get like 75 to 80% of the country says yes. It's hard to get 75 to 80% of the country at national polling to say anything. Like, people just won't agree that much, or they'll click the wrong button, or So that's the core thing we need to remember is the majority of the country is on our side on the core issue.
Right.
So how do you tie things back to the core issue? That's why, if you can articulate why. I think one of the best things, like when we're talking about AR-15s, it's making people understand why people are selecting AR-15s to defend themselves in their homes. Like that's a very important aspect. Because people don't understand that, like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, actually, if you look at it, there are many reasons why that may be the best tool for them to defend themselves and their families and their homes. And so, again, you have to make people understand who don't understand this stuff at all. And that's how we get those types of bills we were talking about. These bills are being drafted by people that don't understand this stuff.
Right.
And that's how we get bills where A2 flash hiders make you a felon. But that's one of the most important things. I think you're exactly right that you have to do it in a common professional way.
Yeah.
Or else not only do you alienate the target audience, the lawmakers that you're potentially trying to reach, you're also going to alienate people that we need to generally agree with us and who do. And we need to make sure that they continue to generally agree with us on the basic principle of people in this country have a right to have firearms for defense of themselves and their families.
100%. So let's say you have that person who is, on the 2A side or whatnot, they're sick of talking to politicians on the other side. What kind of impact, for example, like I know you guys have the thing going on in Richmond on the 13th, the tradition of having lobby day that's January 13th and lobby day on January 20th. I'll be teaching in Texas, so I won't be here for your guys' event. Otherwise, I'd be there. But I am going to lobby day on the 20th. And I'll be honest with you, based on my schedule and things like that, it's the first time I've gone to lobby day, and I'm kind of excited about it. But I am also kind of leaning to the side that even if I get an audience with one of those lawmakers, it's not going to have very much of an effect. Or am I wrong? Or do I not need to have a meeting with them and just the mass of the collective will be enough to perhaps move the needle? What are your thoughts on that?
I think the best thing you can do is meet with your lawmakers, because people need to understand that their constituents are also there. Otherwise, they could think that, like I said, there are three things that are going to convince people. You're going to have the facts, the emotional arguments, and you're going to have personal, arguments. And that is for politicians that they're going to get not going to get reelected.
Right.
And so there has to be people need to understand that, say there are 10,000 people there, which would be the by far biggest turnout, I think, for Lobby Day or for our event. If that happens and they, like a particular lawmaker can look outside and be like, well, I'm not sure that any of those are my constituents because no one's coming to meet with me, then they think they're safe. And that, maybe those 10,000 people came just out of the Southwest or, down from, up from Virginia Beach. And so that's why it's important to make sure that you connect with your lawmakers. They need to understand it's their constituents too, that, there are gun owners law-abiding gun owners all over the Commonwealth who are very concerned with all of the legislation that's been introduced, and how it's going to actually personally impact them. Right. And so I think that connecting with your lawmakers is the primary reason to go to Richmond. I think having a large number of people show up is going to be beneficial, but if those people don't connect with their lawmakers, you end up with this problem where, because this is going to be tight. I mean, if you look at you start to try to, whip votes, you're looking mostly at the Senate because it's closer. Especially with one senator has already kind of articulated that he's at least against hardware bans. And so that means, if we get one more senator to one of the anti-gun senators to just abstain on at least some of the restrictive stuff, that it would fail. They wouldn't even have to vote no. So we're targeting, we're going to target the three we think most possible chances of senators to flip as our primary targets to on this. I think that the idea that we're going to get out of the session with no additional gun control is probably wishful thinking. It's going to, I think we're going to try to stop the most restrictive stuff. We're going to oppose anything that is detrimental to gun owners, obviously, but elections have consequences, and we need to, everybody needs to understand that hopefully this makes people, in 2 more years, we're going to get another chance to vote in Virginia, and hopefully all of the people that are very upset right now remember this and turn out next time.
And that's the grand conundrum with all this, right? Virginia going blue, right? And then, because I was going to segue into this, all the sanctuary counties and towns and stuff like that. I mean, right now, I think there's only five counties that aren't a sanctuary county, right? So I just don't understand that. Like, where were all these people on election night?
Right. I mean, if they had all voted, I don't think we would be in this situation because it's so close. I mean, it's we lost. There was a seat that the House was. There were some seats. There was a seat that was lost by 18 votes. There was another one by 200. Like, people, this idea that my vote doesn't matter. Like, when you look at elections that are hundreds of votes all across the state, there were delegate seats and senators, Senate seats that were very tight margins. And so that's why you have to your vote matters.
Yeah.
You need to get out there. That's the other thing is, though, if you look at an election heat map, basically all the counties, they've it just so happens the way that the population is concentrated in the state that, yes, there's like 2 spots, kind of 3 in the state where it's in those 5 or so counties that haven't, adopted sanctuary resolutions. Those are the same places where the majority of the population lives. And so that's where most of the delegates and senators come from. I mean, that's
living in Loudoun is one of those counties, man. It's so frustrating. I tell people all the time, it's like, look, I've lived in Loudoun County for 15 years, and I've got to tell you, I've never met anybody who after I talked to, I went, that's an anti-gunner right there.
Yeah.
or an ultra liberal. I've never met them.
Yeah.
No offense to my friends out here that way, but
Yeah.
they're that. What do you call when you mix red and blue? Is it purple?
Yeah.
Is that what that
Yeah.
is, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you talk to them, they're physically conservative, they're freedom oriented, yada, 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 but they all work for the government
Yeah.
or work for a company that works for the government, and big government is better, and voting left is better for their paycheck.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be the one to call them hypocrites and stuff like that. I'm not going to be like that, man. You got to take care of your family first. And, in our neck of the woods, if you're not making good money, you're out. I would like to put one point before I get your idea about the sanctuary counties and their effect. I would like to say, because there's all these groups popping up, right, about the sanctuary counties and the Second Amendment, Friends of the Second Amendment, yada, yada, yada. And a lot of them are just about spewing hate, right? We're not going to win anybody over by spewing hate. Can we stop saying, well, this Democrat and that Democrat, right? Because all you're going to do is that I know plenty of Democrats that are avid gun owners, right? And a lot of them, and this is my thing, right? Because talking about shooting doesn't make you a good shooter. They will put a lot of my conservative friends to shame on the range.
Right.
You know what I mean? So let's stop saying that. Even the liberal part, which I understand it's even leaning like that. It's just like you said, the core issue. Just do it to the core issue. Are you anti-Second Amendment or are you pro-Second Amendment? And go after it like that. Because, it was funny. I won't mention his name. He's an attorney too that works in this field, but he used to shoot the NRA match all the time and lived in Alexandria, right? And he goes, dude, if you went up and down my block, it's an armory with all of my liberal friends that own guns. You know what I mean? So we got to stop dividing people based on their political affiliations and just stick to the core matter, and that's the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that it was so not an issue that I didn't have to do this. I'd go do it. I would happily go. I love my job, but if it meant that all gun control is done and we get to do whatever throughout the entire United States, I would happily go do something else for that. I would take that trade, But because I would have accomplished the primary thing that I wanted to accomplish by working at NRA. So, that's. That moment would be amazing, and I think that the only way we get there is by having this be a nonpartisan issue. There has to be if it's an issues that the entire country agrees upon are not they aren't things that politicians run on or anything because they can't.
Right.
Everybody agrees on something. It's not this type of issue, and so I think the more we can do to move towards that and. The only thing that I think is sometimes frustrating is that I think that those are some of the most important gun owners to talk to their lawmakers so that they understand that there are a lot of Democrats or liberals or whatever that are pro-gun and that their lawmakers understand that. Because I think they tend to hear and especially with all the money flowing from Bloomberg, they tend to see it as, well, this is coming in because, all of these people are supporting it. And it's not in this case, when the NRA is able to spend money, it's because there's a lot of individual donors. I think the average donor to our PAC is $27. And, every town, which is Bloomberg's gun control apparatus, they have basically, they have some small donors, but they have one guy that's giving them the vast majority of their funding.
Right.
And so it's not that way. It's not. They're not getting funding because it's a popular issue. They're getting funding because one guy wants it to happen. He just happens to have $55 billion.
Right. Exactly. So the effect of these sanctuary counties, what effect do they have? Is it just, is it pomp and circumstance, or do you think it has a legitimate effect?
I think politically it's very helpful. I think to make it, again, you have to make elected representatives understand that you're very concerned about actions that they might take. And I think it's been, they've gotten a lot of what we call earned media out of it. You're getting, whenever you get media that you don't buy, that's earned media. And so they've gotten a lot of, especially because the proximity of Virginia to DC. We've gotten, there have been some Washington Post stories, things like that about the.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's this isn't the first state to do it. We've been working in New Mexico, Illinois, Colorado. They all did. I think there are some other states with a few counties, but they had major pushes to have a lot of counties. I don't think any has done as high of a percentage as Virginia, but I don't think that anywhere else the change has been as stark, or the potential change. Like we're looking at going from a relatively gun-friendly jurisdiction,
sure,
to like extreme gun control is like the switch that they're trying to make in one legislative session. And I think that like we talked about at the beginning, that's one of the reasons that people are like, well, this probably isn't going to happen, is because that's never really happened before. Like, these other states have all taken a more incremental approach. But again, I think that, as you pointed out, there's a lot of pressure coming from, where did all the money come from that helped those people get elected this cycle? And what does that guy want? I mean, that guy wants gun control. And so, I think we have to take it very seriously that they mean everything they say when they introduce bills that don't have grandfather provisions and would mean confiscating, the hundreds of thousands of, lawfully possessed guns in the Commonwealth.
Yep. Okay, man. So,
I don't think I ever answered the question.
So, that's okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
The sanctuary counties. As far as the legally binding effect, probably not a lot. But I think that no gun control laws are really enforced, anyways. That's one of our biggest frustrations, is that, especially at the federal level, they tout like how important it is to get expanded background checks. That's a bill every year at the federal level.
Like one conviction of that in the last.
In the last year that we had direct correlation between number of people denied by NICS and the number of people actually prosecuted based on those denials. I mean, you're looking at 110,000 denials in 30 prosecutions, not 30,000, 30. And some of those are multiple charges on single individuals. So you're not even, it's absurd. I mean, they're just not enforced. And so that's why I think that's one of the major frustrations. And this is one of the things that I think that gun owners should try to explain to a lawmaker who may not be as friendly, is to say, look, why don't we try to see how the gun control we actually have works? If we're going to make it illegal for felons to have, someone that's been convicted of a serious felony to have a firearm, it doesn't really do much if we don't prosecute them. And so, those are the types of things where, enforcement actually matters. But in this case, if all of these jurisdictions are saying they're not going to enforce it, I mean, that's, these laws are, whatever gets passed maybe isn't going to get passed. Maybe it's a good, in this case, that's a good thing, because these laws are unconstitutional.
Right.
And so, and that, maybe that helps give a window, especially if there's almost certainly going to be a legal challenge, to help delay any enforcement of, unconstitutional laws against generally law-abiding people. Right.
Cool. All right. I think that was a very thorough explanation of everything that's going on in our fine state. I wonder if they're going to change the flag too. That whole 6 Semper Tyrannis thing kind of doesn't fit.
Not very fitting.
Yeah. All right, dude. So we're going to get to the end of the session. We talked about this before we got on here. So the get it off your chest, right? And you can talk about anything you want. Don't talk about your neighbors. Nobody cares about your neighbors, right?
Yeah.
What do people need to start doing to get better? What do people need to stop doing to get better, right? Whatever you want to talk about, shooting, supporting, gun organizations, blah, blah, blah.
I think it's kind of a more general principle. You can apply it to both and lots of other things in life. But I think, the problem with getting better in a lot of cases is preconceived notions. I try to always, I have this idea, and it's not my idea, but that, everything I know could be wrong. And to approach problems, like getting better at shooting is a problem. Figuring out how to defeat gun control is a problem. How to approach those problems, without the underlying assumptions that I have. And I think that, especially in shooting, where you have, there have been lots of different would say, non-performance based ideas for why certain things are better.
Yeah.
Like it's better, like if part of the reason that those things carry forward is people carry them around with them rather than forgetting everything and saying, what is the goal? What is my goal here? And how do I best achieve that? And get rid of these preconceived ideas that I have. I have a massive whiteboard in my office at work. I do the same thing for, legal issues, for legislation, things like that. What is the desired end state? And then I start drawing and try to figure out how to get there. And I try to give up whatever I bring with me and just think about it as a fresh problem. That's not to say that there aren't a lot of steps you can take along, or I guess not steps, but kind of jumps forward that you can take based on the learning of others. I mean, that's true in everything. It's easier to get better faster at something if you have, guidance to get there instead of figuring out things on your own.
Sure.
But I think having some type of, metric to test that, and maybe for some people the performance-based thing is not their goal. I don't really. That doesn't make sense to my brain, but yeah. So, yeah. So that's kind of I would say that's the most the thing that people need to stop doing. I would say is stop carrying around all these preconceived ideas and think about everything from the everything could be wrong perspective.
Okay. Fair. One question before I let you go, right? As a martial artist, Jiu-Jitsu and everything like that. I don't know if it was an unintended or an intended consequence of the resurfacing of SB 64, which is already on the books. Now they're just adding to it. The whole thing about training, right? A lot of people have extrapolated that into martial arts schools. Was that an unintended consequence, or do you think they're going full retard on that stuff? Like all your rights to self-defense are out the window.
I don't think so. If you look at the bill, the part that's primarily being added, those parts exist under current law, and most states have similar analogous laws. Those are really those bills are aimed at preventing people from engaging in activity to overthrow the government.
Right.
And applying them to situations where, so for example, you have a constitutional right to train with firearms. It's obviously there's no right to arms if you don't have a right to train with them. There's actually there was a case that we did out in Chicago, Zell v. City of Chicago, that was about that, and the Seventh Circuit in that case found that obviously there's a corollary right to train. The right to arms wouldn't be much without some right to train at arms. And so sometimes they pass laws, where they know that they're probably a little bit over the line of constitutionality and they're just never going to enforce them that way, but they're trying to discourage behavior rather than, pass a tighter, more clearly constitutional law. And again, those training provisions are basically current law. The big change is the assembly provision, and I think that is that's a direct result of they want people to stop, parading with guns or something like that. But I think they're going to have a hard time applying it. It still has a criminal intent requirement, and essentially, if you were violating that, you'd probably be committing a simple assault under. You can't. If you do something with the intent of injuring another person and you currently have the capability to injure them and it's reasonable for them to expect the injury, that's kind of the definition of common law assault. So,
right. Okay.
So I don't think that I don't know. That bill could be enforced in a terrible way. And again, that'll be a legal fight at the time if that happens. But I think that bill is more about trying to curtail behavior through just the passage of the legislation without actually prosecuting people, because they know that a lot of the prosecutions wouldn't be constitutional.
Right.
When you start to get into limiting people's ability to assemble, the courts are going to be more suspect of laws that do that.
Right. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Well, dude, that was super informative, man. I appreciate you coming on. Anything else going on that you want to let people know about, or are you just going to go back to your office and do what you do, man?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if people are in, anybody that's in Virginia, to be very focused right now on, because it's going to happen very fast. We think they're going to try to, move quickly. That was the lesson. If you look at New York in 2013 versus Colorado in 2013, New York passed the SAFE Act overnight.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I think people that are in favor of gun control took the lesson that moving quickly is better for them because they don't get the popular pushback. That's going to be, just pay attention to what's going on. We have legislative alerts. You don't have to be a member or anything to get them. If you just go onto the ILA site and you can sign up for the alerts and you'll get emails, not fundraisers or anything, just the actual informative alerts. Yep. You can also sign up to volunteer. You don't have to, don't necessarily have to volunteer with us. You can volunteer with somebody else, but and mostly what volunteering in this capacity is going to be is just helping people, coordinate and get them connected with their lawmakers down in Richmond. And then if you want to the biggest thing we need volunteers for is when we get back into an election cycle, volunteering to knock doors. We knocked a ton of doors this last election cycle in Virginia, and that's one of the effective ways, but it's very human capital intensive. You need volunteers to do that.
Sure. Awesome. Cool, man. Awesome. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Yeah.
So here's my part, guys. I got to pay the bills. Otherwise, the CFO gets very, very mad. If you guys are interested in training me with me, either if it's the AIWB thing or the red dot pistol thing, for agencies, for law enforcement agencies, the instructor classes, go to modernsamuraiproject.com. Look at my class schedule. If you think I'm not coming near you, you need to look harder because I got 60 classes across the country next year. Would love to train with you. And more importantly than all that, like Josh said, please get involved, pay attention, stop being divisive, right? Be professional, be courteous, and be good, stay safe, get training.